in which our protagonists, Anna and Levine, finally meet, and in which one of their tales comes to an end. Chapter 5. Two very interesting things were offered at the matinee concert. One was a fantasia, King Lear on the Heath, the other a quartet dedicated to the memory of Bach. Both pieces were new and in the new spirit, and Levine wanted to form his own opinion of them. Having taken his sister-in-law to her seat, he installed himself by a column and resolved to listen as closely and conscientiously as possible. He tried not to get distracted and spoil his impression by looking at the arm waving of the white-tied conductor, which is always such an unpleasant distraction of musical attention, or at the ladies in hats who had carefully tied ribbons over their ears, especially for the concert, or at all the faces either unoccupied by anything or occupied by interests quite other than music. He tried to avoid meeting musical connoisseurs and talkers, and stood with lowered eyes, listening. But the longer he listened to the King Lear fantasia, the further he felt from any possibility of forming some definite opinion for himself. The musical expression of feeling was ceaselessly beginning, as if gathering itself up, but it fell apart at once into fragments of new beginnings of musical expression, and sometimes into extremely complex sounds, connected by nothing other than the mere whim of the composer. But these fragments of musical expressions, good ones on occasion, were unpleasant because they were totally unexpected and in no way prepared for. Gaiety, sadness, despair, tenderness, and triumph appeared without justification like a madman's feelings, and just as with a madman, these feelings passed unexpectedly. All through the performance, Levine felt like a deaf man watching people dance. He was in utter perplexity when the piece ended, and felt great fatigue from such strained but in no way rewarded attention. Loud applause came from all sides. Everybody stood up, began walking, talking. Wishing to explain his perplexity by means of other people's impressions, Levine began to walk about, looking for connoisseurs, and was glad to see one well-known connoisseur talking with Pestsov, whom he knew. "Amazing," Pestsov, dense bass, said. "Good afternoon, Konstantin Dmitrich. Particularly graphic and, so to speak, sculptural and rich in color in the place where you feel Cordelia approaching, where a woman, das Weiblich, enters the struggle with fate, don't you think?" "But what does Cordelia have to do with it?" Levine asked timidly, forgetting completely that the fantasia portrayed King Lear on the Heath. "Cordelia comes in here," said Pestsov, tapping his fingers on the satiny playbill he was holding, and handing it to Levine. Only then did Levine remember the title of the fantasia, and he hastened to read Shakespeare's verses in Russian translation, printed on the back of the bill. "You can't follow without it," said Pestsov, addressing Levine, since his interlocutor had left and there was no one else for him to talk to. During the entr'acte, an argument arose between Levine and Pestsov about the virtues and shortcomings of the Wagnerian trend in music. Levine maintained that the mistake of Wagner and his followers lay in their music wishing to cross over to the sphere of another art, just as poetry is mistaken when it describes facial features, something that should be done by painting. And he gave as an example of such mistake a sculptor who decided to carve in marble the phantoms of poetic images emerging around the figure of a poet on a pedestal. The sculptor gave these phantoms so little of the phantasmic that they're even holding on to the stairs, said Levine. He liked the phrase, but he did not remember whether he might not have used it before, and precisely with Pestsov, and having said it he became embarrassed. Pestsov maintained that art is one, and that it can teach its highest manifestations only by uniting all its forms. The second part of the concert Levine could not hear at all. Pestsov stood next to him and spent almost the whole time talking to him, denouncing the piece for its superfluous, cloying, affected simplicity, and comparing it with the pre-Raphaelites in painting. On the way out, Levine met still more acquaintances, with whom he talked about politics, music, and mutual acquaintances. Among others, he met Count Bohl, whom he had completely forgotten to visit. "Well, you can go now," Natalie said to him when he told her of it. "Maybe they won't receive you, and then you can come and fetch me at the meeting. I'll still be there." If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.